We've made it to Kyoto, home of Eisei-En, Kyoto. Let's go see Bjorn and see what he has to say about his new nursery. Eisei-En, Kyoto. And as luck has it, today is the first day that Bjorn has his shop open. So the garden is full of visitors. We're going to wait a little bit. I'm going to take a few shots here of the trees and then we'll do a short interview with Bjorn about his garden and how he sees it. And look, this is the first tree that I encountered as I came into the garden here today. Perfect. Kaide, Trident, Bonsai. Well, now you're also on the recording, so...
Excellent.
Just so you know.
All right.
And I found him. Bjorn it is, right?
That's right.
Well, thank you for having me here today.
I'm glad you could come. It's our opening day here at the garden, so you're first and part of the first group that's come through, which is great.
I noticed, and I actually already mentioned when I was walking in, it's very, very busy. So yeah, sounds like a great day to start your nursery here.
Definitely, yeah. The garden builders literally finished yesterday, so just in time, right before the kokufu starts.
So that was also your planning, that when kokufu starts, that your nursery is ready and you can show to international visitors what's happening here, right?
Exactly, yeah. I told the garden builders that we had a pretty hard deadline, so they were working 6 days a week for the last, I guess, maybe 2 months straight to get everything done from sun up until sundown every single day.
So how long has the total build been here?
So we broke ground on the land in January of last year. This was just a big flat piece of land with nothing on it, including no house. So they broke ground on the house in January, finished that in September, and then we moved in that month. And then in late October, they started the garden build here. So it's been a very quick turnaround, basically 1 solid year from beginning to end.
That's still a decent amount of time.
Yeah, it's impressive how fast they are here. It did take a year of planning beforehand, so altogether you could say it's 2 years of work.
2-year process.
Yeah, but the actual building process was a single year.
So now I think it's a little bit confusing. So I looked up Eisei-En and it sent me to Tennessee.
Right.
And I booked my tickets to Tokyo.
Uh-huh.
Why the move?
So it was kind of, multifaceted reasoning behind why we wanted to come back here. It was always kind of a dream of mine and my wife's to move back to Japan. We had lived here for so long before. I'd done my apprenticeship here. She had moved here even prior to me moving here. So she, I think, had been here maybe 15 years total before we moved to the States to set up Eisei-En in Nashville. Yeah. And then when we were back in the States, we thought, maybe when we retire in the future, we'll move back to Japan. And we really wanted to come back to Kyoto because this is actually the city where we met. Okay. At university, we went to university here in the city. And in the back of our minds, we thought, okay, it'll be maybe 30 years in the future, we'll come back here. And then all of a sudden, our daughter was born while we were in the States, and we started to think a lot more deeply about where we wanted to raise her, the environment, the schooling, all of that. And we thought, okay, well, maybe when she's in high school, we'll move back. And then we thought, well, that's going to be a little late for her language skills. Maybe middle school would be better. And then the more we thought about it, we thought, why don't we just move back now so that she can be fully inculcated into the culture here, learn the language in a native way. Yep. Being so young. At the time when they moved back, my wife and my daughter came here actually about a year before I moved back. She was, I think, 2 years old, which is like perfect timing, to really absorb the language. So it's been a positive thing, I think, for our family in general. So it's mainly a family-related decision to move here.
And what is now happening with Eisei-En in Tennessee? Is that going to be finished, or do you have a caretaker there who runs it for you?
It's totally finished. So we sold everything that we had in the States. We sold the property, the nursery, all of the trees, everything had to be sold. The main reason for that is in moving here, we don't have permanent residency here quite yet. So it makes it very difficult to, say, take a bank loan and build a home and that kind of thing. So we needed to have all the funds that we could to build this new project here. So I literally sold every tree that I had in the States, and we stockpiled those funds and then came here and built this property.
Yeah, I think a little over a year ago, I visited one of your trees at the National Bonsai Museum.
Oh, right, yeah,
the very tall one. Yeah. It's, I think you were there a few days before I was, just handing it over formally. Okay. It's impressive trees. It's, well, having quite a few trees myself. I have about 300 trees, but not at this stage at all. I find it hard to let go.
Yeah.
What was it like for you to let trees go? Because some of them will have been in your collection for quite a few years as well.
Yeah, I think, coming to Japan and doing an apprenticeship here, part of the goal of the apprenticeship is to learn how to expedite the developmental process on a plant. So how to take a semi-raw or even a raw piece of material like a yamadori and turn it into something beautiful in a short amount of time. So learning those skills here and then going back to the States and doing that with our native trees there, I realized that, you know, I could turn let's say a juniper from the mountains into a show-ready tree in 3 to 5 years, depending on the scenario.
That's great.
Because of the skills that I had learned here. So doing it as a business and having that skill set, it makes the buying and selling of plants a lot easier. It's partly a necessity, but also, you know that if you sell this plant, you're going to have another one that you could build out to the same level, you know, within a relatively short amount of time. That being said, there were a handful of trees that I had in the States that I had started when I was maybe like 14, 15, 16 years old. So those trees, it was difficult to let those go, but I did end up selling most of those to my students who I knew would take good care of them, and who I'm in constant contact with. And you can
revisit them when you get home.
Yeah, so I know that the trees are doing well. I get photo updates every once in a while from the students. So from that perspective, it doesn't feel like I fully let the trees go.
You just handed them over to the next caretaker, which in a way is a very Japanese way of looking at bonsai, right? We totally see it as something we grow from a cutting out into a full tree, and here it's like, no, I just take a stage of the tree and then I hand it over to the next owner.
Exactly.
Now, I just had a look around here. You have quite an amazing collection here that I think most Europeans would be very, very proud of owning. But you put this together over the last year or 2 years then?
Yeah, I started officially kind of buying trees here in Japan about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
I moved back here 2 years ago, but we knew prior to that we were coming back. So I didn't make any announcements about it. I just kind of kept it quiet for the first year. And in the background, I was slowly buying trees, mostly from my teacher, Fujikawa-san, down in Osaka, and stockpiling those trees at his nursery. And then once we made the official move back here, made the announcement and everything, that's when I really started going around Japan and buying up good quality trees that I'd been interested in for many, many years. Some of the trees in the collection here I've been in love with for like 20 years, you know, seeing them in books when I was a kid, and being able to acquire some of those trees now has been like a lifelong dream, and it's really cool to have them in the garden now.
Or maybe in a second you can show me a few of those trees where you say, well, these are very special to me, and maybe also why. Because for me, I look around here and it's like, well, pretty much any of these trees would be a pleasure to have in my garden. Moving between Japan, Tennessee, and back to Japan to grow bonsai means moving between different climatic zones, different weathering patterns. Is there a difference in how you keep bonsai here as to how you would do that at home?
Not in Tennessee. Tennessee's weather, especially in Nashville where we were based, is nearly identical to central Japan. So winters maybe are a little colder in Tennessee than they are here, but summers are basically the same. You're looking at like 38, 39 degrees Celsius, you know, so pushing 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and like 90% humidity in the summer. So from that perspective, it's been basically seamless going from one place to the other. I would say the nice thing about coming to Japan versus Nashville in particular is that in Kyoto, the weather is pretty consistent. So meaning that in the spring, the temperatures kind of ramp up and they level out, and it's just nice for the most part. And in the fall, they sort of dip down and level out for the winter. In Tennessee, we have these massive fluctuations in temperature that actually ended up causing a lot of problems at my garden. We lost trees. One year we had temperatures that got down to, it was minus 10 degrees Fahrenheit, which I think is like minus 20, 25 degrees Celsius. Does that sound right?
I need to do the calculations, but
it's very, very cold.
Something like that,
It's like a once in a 50 year kind of, you know, winter weather pattern.
Spikes.
Yeah, and I put as many of the trees as I could into the workshop to protect them, but we couldn't fit everything. So the plants I left outside were the high elevation trees, thinking, you know, these come from cold areas, they should be fine. What I didn't realize is that most of those plants in nature are covered in snow during the winter, so they're insulated. And we lost so many plants as a result of that. Whereas here, it's just a much easier climate to deal with. There's less of those swings in temperature here.
It's actually funny that you say that about the snow, because if you look on online fora, people, when it starts snowing, they're like, oh, what do I do? Do I cover them? And everybody always says, no, move the snow away because it's too heavy on the branches. Whereas the opposite is, if you just leave the snow there, it insulates the tree, gets these cold spikes.
Absolutely,
so that's really nice to see that you also had that realization at that time. Not in a nice way, though.
Yeah, it was a bad scenario. A lot of those trees that ended up not making it that winter were, in fact, students and customers' trees. So a lot of refunds had to be given out as a result of that. But it's just part of doing bonsai as a business. This is, it's a reputational thing, but it's also there's a moral aspect of it too. Like, I'm the caretaker of these plants. It's my job to make sure that they survive. And if that doesn't happen, then it's on me, to rectify that scenario.
Yeah. So you say bonsai as a business. If you look at the nursery that you've started here, I don't see a lot of propagation area, so I don't think you're going to be propagating trees. What is the sort of business that you will be running here mostly, and particularly when you look at an international audience, what would be interesting for them to know about what you're building here?
So the facility here is almost entirely education-based. I've kind of designed this out as more like a semi-permanent museum. I mean, trees here will move in and out. We will sell some of the material on occasion, but that's not really the main function of the garden. It's more of an educational place where people can come and learn in person. We have a very small workshop in the front of the garden here. It can fit anywhere from 1 to 3 students max at a time. Yep. So it's very kind of personalized learning experience when you do come here. But we're offering individual day classes, 1-day classes, or up to 4 weeks if you want to come for an extended period of time to study here. And because we have such high quality material here, trees that have provenance, plants that have been in the kokofu, students when they come in will get to work on those trees. So they get to add to the legacy of those plants. So it's much more of a kind of focus on refinement, which is very similar to what I did during my apprenticeship at Fujikawa-san's garden, rather than propagation or kind of initial Yamadori work like what I did in the States.
Well, then I think later on we'll have to talk a little bit, because I am looking for some courses on refinement. The basics I've done. I've not been to Japan for 6 years for a full-on dip in Japanese culture and courses, but of course I've worked, do you know Werner Busch in Germany?
Of course, I've been to Werner's place a couple of times,
So I spent, I think, 6 years, several weekends every year with him and with Katagiri-san, who then flies out of Obuse to come to Werner's place to learn. But then you only get so far.
Right.
You learn how to do the basic styling, the basic development of trees, and officially you're then a holder of a teacher certificate, but that's actually where it just starts. Then you have this tree that's maturity, and you look here and you can see how the next level is just coming on these trees. So that'll be really interesting to do. How do people reach out to you if they would be interested in coming here?
Yeah, so for right now, we're compiling kind of a mailing list of folks who are interested in the program here. We haven't officially started it yet. We have been trickling in a couple students to kind of test out things, but these are some of my former students from the States, that I'm familiar with. But for those going forward who want to come here, if you want to go to my website at the top, it's there's a tab that says school. So the website's just my name, bjornbjorholm.com or Eisei-En.com or bonsaiu.com. It'll all take you to the same place.
I will pop a link down below in the description, don't worry.
So yeah, if you click on the site at the top, there's a tab that says school, and then it has all of the information there. If you want to just email me through there, I'll put you on the email list, and once we officially start taking students, I'll send an email out to those on the waiting list first.
Okay, so if you want to come here and take classes, go to the website, register for the waiting list. Simple. If I look at Japan and I look at bonsai, I have the feeling that they experience bonsai different than we do, well, let's say in the West. Do you see differences there as well, or?
Yeah, I would say it depends on which country you're speaking of. There's so many different cultures and things that kind of tie into how people view art from different backgrounds and whatnot. I would say that if you compare, let's say, Japan to Europe, Europe to the States, and the States to Japan, there's some big differences between those. But I would say of those kind of 3 big regions, Japan and Europe are a bit more similar. Kind of goals are aligned a little bit more than the United States. I think this is because of such vast differences in culture.
And this is, of course, broad stroke speaking, nothing for individuals, but just in general, the trends, right?
General, like general observation. Like the United States is a very individualistic society, right? Yeah. So, and there's a lot of data to back this up. I don't know if you're familiar with Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory.
I've actually been teaching cultural dimension in university,
okay.
so yeah.
Excellent. All right, so you know quite well, yeah. I was doing a little bit of research on that when I was working on my doctorate here in Japan. That was like a side project during my apprenticeship that I eventually bailed on because bonsai kind of took off for me. But I was looking into some of that research, and the United States is such an individualistic country that when it comes to things like art, there's a saying that beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and Americans really latch onto that. So it's not so much that, I guess what I should say is that they come at it from kind of the opposite end of the spectrum that the Japanese and the Europeans do, where here it's a focus on the process rather than the final product, whereas in the States it's the focus is entirely on that final product. So they're kind of coming at it from a different perspective, and sometimes that results in really unique and interesting things. Sometimes it results in really poorly done things and things that are done differently just for the sake of being different rather than for the sake of creating something beautiful or inspirational, or sometimes even creating something grotesque that is meant to express something can be an interesting thing to do. But quite often in the States it's done specifically for the sake of being different. Yeah, there's a book that was written by a fellow named Donald Ritchie. He lives in Tokyo. He's a film critic. He's been there, I don't know, probably 40 years, maybe longer at this point. It's called A Tractate on Japanese Aesthetics. It's only like 60, 65 pages, but it's like the best distillation in English of Japanese aesthetics and principles, kind of the mindset of where those ideas come from here. And to me, the most important thing out of that book is he discusses that in Japan, it's all about the process to get to a final goal. And that final goal can be something aesthetically pleasing. But let's say, for example, I think he uses lacquerware as an example in the book. He talks about, I think it's maybe 14, 15 layers of lacquer is what typically goes on a lacquer bowl, something like that. If any one of those layers is not added on, you won't get the same depth to the lacquerware. If it's not dried out for a specific amount of time, you won't be able to get that final end result. Bonsai is very similar to that. For example, if you want to build ramification on a tree, we know the way to do that with the trident maple, for example, is to defoliate it at the right time of year. You do that year after year after year, and eventually you will get close to your final goal, which is full ramification, but something that's also aesthetically pleasing. And you also have to have kind of an eye for pruning and that kind of thing. But simply applying the right technique at the right time of year over and over and over again will get you 90% of the way there to that goal. It's that last kind of 10% that is, I think, more up to the individual to sort of imbue into the art to some degree, and that's where the art really emerges.
And that's where you also recognize the hand of the master in the tree. Yeah, things here are much more subtle too when it comes to the hand of the master.
That's one thing in the United States, people really want their work to be recognized as their work. Here, there doesn't seem to be that much of an emphasis on that, but the subtle difference from artist to artist is actually, I think it's more interesting in that it's harder to distinguish. But once you know and once you study for a long time, once you know what you're looking at, you can tell. Like I can see 20 junipers lined up that are all styled by different masters here. To the untrained eye, they all look really cool. They all look basically the same, but I can tell you, okay, Suzuki-san styled this one because of the lift on the branches like this. Kimura-san styled this one because of the size of the pads relative to the trunk. So these very, very small kind of subtle differences will indicate the signature of the artist here.
I actually very much like the post you did a couple of months ago when you restyled a large juniper that you styled during your apprenticeships as well, where it originally was a very smooth green dome, and now you'd broken up the foliage in much more smaller pads, really creating a very different image. Is that part of you in your growth as an artist, or is it more showing, hey, I've grown out of the, under the wings of my sensei, and I now show what I can do without his care?
Yeah, I think there's a misunderstanding about bonsai in Japan that it's very cookie cutter and that all of the artists kind of style everything the same way. But if you look again from artist to artist, there will be subtle differences, and sometimes there are vast differences as well. But if you look back during my apprenticeship with Fujikawa-san, his emphasis is much more on very, very clean lines, almost overly clean. Now, when I style trees on my own, I take a much kind of softer approach to the plants, sometimes much to his chagrin, which is fine. Like that's his preference and how he likes to do it. But I have just a slightly different aesthetic preference. And it's different than, say, again, like how Shinji Suzuki might style a tree or Kimura might style a tree. They would all probably reset my branches in a slightly different way. But I think that's one of the more fascinating aspects of bonsai here.
But they all still recognize that the trees that the others do are done well.
Yes.
It's just different.
Yeah, and what's interesting too is that if you were to give all of the main masters here in Japan the exact same tree and like a raw piece of material and have them style it, I guarantee you 90% of them would build the basic structure in essentially the same way. They would find the most interesting front, and it would be kind of in the same general area. Angle would be basically about the same. It's those final kind of details that would determine the difference between artist to artist.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think whether I have anything left over that I wanted to ask you, or is there anything that you're like, well, this is something you really should cover?
Well, maybe we could just walk around and look at some of the trees in the garden. And I think I can explain maybe the layout of the garden as well here, because it's quite interesting. It's not my concept necessarily, it's our garden builder's concept, but it's so cool. I'd like to show you some of those things around the garden.
Yeah, because how did you get to the garden design and actually the house design? You have your own aesthetic view on how a garden should be, but this doesn't look like an American or European garden. This is very much a Japanese laid out garden. You brought in expertise locally, I suppose.
Yeah, I initially, once we bought this property here and we had kind of designed the house, and I knew the layout of the house, I designed the garden myself around that. I knew the elements that I wanted in here, but I didn't know necessarily how all the details would kind of fall into place. So we ended up hiring Eisei-En, which is a very famous garden building company here in Kyoto. It was kind of a very serendipitous initial meeting with that company. I was out with a friend of ours here in Kyoto, an older lady who's my wife's former boss. She was introducing me to an accountant to help me with my business here. And the bartender overheard us discussing what my business was. And he mentioned that, I have a customer whose wife owns a very famous garden building company here in Kyoto. That fella happens to come in about this time every Friday night. If you wait about 10 minutes, he'll probably be here. Sure enough, 10 minutes later, he showed up. We ended up drinking with him and talking for probably 3 hours that night. He passed my information along to his wife, and then from there, the rest is history. So,
nice.
Yeah, it's been a very awesome experience working with that company. Sone-san, who is the CEO and president of the company right now, she's third generation owner of the company, and she did an amazing job taking my basic design and adding all of these incredible details throughout, very thoughtful things throughout the garden.
It looks very impressive, especially knowing that this garden finished yesterday.
Literally yesterday.
It looks like it could have been here for a decade.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. The elements that they've put in here and the way it's all blended together. Yeah, it looks, like you said, like it's been here for a long time.
Yeah, very nice, calm place. And this is actually what I noticed a lot going around Japan, that everywhere in the big cities you find these quiet gardens. So you just go there and all of a sudden the big city is gone. And you're right in the middle of, nature. Right. Highly stylized nature.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kyoto in particular is very famous for that. You go down the right alley, you're going to find a 300-year-old garden that's just the most stunning thing you've ever seen. And it's endless here. And I've been here, if I add everything up in Kyoto, probably 6 or 7 years. Like I said before, my wife lived in the city here for at least 10 or 12 years. And you could go the same route every day on a bike and still see something new every day in the city with all the little gardens and nooks and crannies and whatnot.
Yeah, very nice. Trying to think. I had a whole list of questions in my head. I think we've covered every topic.
Okay.
Maybe a few trees that you say, well, these are particularly interesting.
Sure. I'll go to the front part of the garden then, and I'll just I'll
explain the garden.
I'll
and then
explain
just,
the full concept, the Shingyo-so thing, and then we can talk about a couple of trees. Okay, excellent.
Right, then I'll go in between you and the...
Okay.